Hiya, I'm Vicky O'Neon. I recently recorded a live looping performance called Rhythm in the middle of a stone circle in the English countryside. And I pretty much brought my whole studio there, and it was so much fun to make that mad performance. So in this video, I will break down how I've built my live looping set in Ableton Live 11, and I will also share some tips and tricks that I've used. And hopefully this will inspire more of you drummers out there to start creating live looping performances using Ableton, because it's honestly so much fun. Okay, let's get into it. So I'm starting off this whole performance by playing a beautiful, quite unusual instrument. It's an electro-organic instrument called the Aframe. And first I'm just introducing the sound of it, which is a combination of a bass sound and a percussive sound. And then I'm laying down a 2-bar loop. And I have a fixed length loop selected. So how do you do that? Here's the fixed length button on push. You hold it in, and here you can select how long you want your loop to be. So I have 2 bars selected, and that means that once I'm starting the loop, it will automatically loop back after 2 bars. So I don't have to press the clip again to stop the loop. And then after that, I very quickly have to pick up my triangle to be ready to lay down the next loop. So I actually have it in my belt to have it ready, because I only have 2 quick bars of 140 BPM to be ready to lay down the next loop. And that also automatically loops back after a couple of bars. The next step I'm doing is actually creating 2 new loops and also triggering a pre-recorded loop. So the pre-recorded loop is a cabasa, and then the new loops that I'm laying down is a vocal loop at the same time as I'm laying down a loop on my microKORG. And I actually spent a lot of time creating this composition, and I was going back and forth with different arrangements, and I just felt like it took too long to get all the layers in. And for those of you who are creating live looping performances, you probably know what I mean. So it's always a combination of like, oh, I want to create everything live. I want it to look cool. But at the same time, it needs to serve the music, and the momentum needs to build quick enough. So I actually ended up having the cabasa as a pre-recorded loop. Okay, so let's see what they sound like when I add them into the mix. So after that, I created a 4-bar loop on my Akai LPD8, and I actually used the same word rhythm, and I took a recording of that word and I loaded it into Ableton's Simpler, which is a super fun, creative tool to play around with when you're using samples. And depending on what mode you use, the classic mode, the one-shot mode, or the slice mode, you can manipulate the sounds in different ways. And in this instance, I used the classic mode, which essentially turns my sample into a melodic instrument. So let me show you. Rhythm. Here's the original sound. Rhythm, rhythm, rhythm. And then rhythm. So you can have a lot of fun with that. So once I've found the notes that I like, I record them in. Here they are. Beautiful. Then I freeze this track. I right click. And then I just drag this into an empty audio track, and boom, I've converted this to audio. So I will then chop up this recording again and have the individual notes inside of the drum rack this time. And that then means that I can play them from my Akai LPD8. And you can see that they are all spread out in funny places. And that's the corresponding MIDI notes on the Akai LPD8. So this section was actually one of the more challenging parts of my performance that I had to practice quite a lot. And the reason is that it's all happening super fast, and it's a 4-bar loop that I'm putting down, which means that I had to turn the fixed length off, and then I had to play in the part, turn the fixed length back on again, because I will need the 2-bar fixed length later on in my performance, quickly jump on the kit, play a snare roll, and also in the middle of that snare roll, trigger scene 1, because I have some additional sounds when the drop actually comes and I start playing the kit to really like hit with that drop in addition to the loops that I've already laid down. And because I don't have my hands free at that point, I've actually assigned one of the pads on my SPD-SX to start all of scene 1. And again, that's something that's really easy to do. Just go up here to MIDI, and here you can see that I've actually assigned almost all of my scenes in this performance to different pads on my SPD-SX. And that means that I constantly have control, and I can chop and change in between different parts just by hitting the SPD-X, and I don't need to go and touch the push at all. However, I also realized when I was prepping for this that once I'm on that kit, I really just wanted to focus on doing a good drum performance. And I didn't want to think about like hitting the pads in the right time, and what if I missed it and then, or hit the wrong pad, so then I ended up in the wrong section. I wanted to have something that was bulletproof, okay? So something that came in really handy there was follow actions. And I think as a live looper, as a live performer, you have this constant battle with yourself where you want to do something that's like cool, and especially with Ableton, the possibilities are just endless, right? But from the experience that I've had with live looping on stage, half of the time people don't even know what you're actually doing and what's going on, and they care more about you just giving a good performance. So I'm trying to always prioritize that. And if there's something that can be automated in the background and I can just fully rely on Ableton doing the program changes for me, and I can just enjoy my performance, then I'm going to go for that option. So let me just show you how follow actions work, because they are super, super cool. Okay, so you can click any scene here, and then you see this little window pop up here, and here you can see the tempo of the scene, the time signature of the scene, and here's the follow action button that you can press to activate the follow action. And here's loads of different options that you can choose from. What do you want to happen next? Okay, and after how many bars? So I set after 8 bars, I want this scene to move to the next scene. And that's what I've actually done for most of these. So here again, after 8 bars, move to the next scene. And the drum solo is also 8 bars, then move to the next scene. Then I hit a 909 section, which is 15 bars long. And then after that, I just have a little 1 bar where everything drops out. And after that, I want to go back to the first scene with all the loops that I created in the beginning. So this one then actually just jumps back to the first one. Let me just play that so you can see. And we're back on scene 1 here. And another thing that's actually really important to think about when you're creating your live looping performances is A, where are you gonna record your loops? Which clip slot are they gonna go into? On what scene? So when you trigger a scene, what will start playing at the same time? Because you might want something that you looped in the beginning to come back later on in the song, with something else that you looped in the beginning to not come back the same time, and so on. And a really handy little feature for that is also to remove stop buttons, which is super easy to do. You literally just right click, and then you can add stop button or remove stop button. Okay, and what that means is that if you're removing a stop button, it means that when you're moving to the next scene, that loop will continue playing. So I wanted my triangle and cabasa, for example, to continue playing almost through the whole arrangement. So I removed almost all of the stop buttons here. So when all these other loops stops when I'm moving into scene 2, the cabasa and the triangle keeps on going. Let me show you. Rhythm. Okay, so now everything is moving to scene 2 automatically. So these 3 continued, whereas all the other loops stopped. Okay, and you can also see that I have a lot of pink going on here, and I tend to always have all of my live loops colored pink and all of my pre-recorded loops in other colors. So here, for example, my pre-recorded loop, the cabasa, is yellow, and that's really handy when I'm practicing for a live looping set, because that means that once I've done a run through, it's super easy for me here on push to just see which loops I've created live, and then I just go delete, and I just delete them. And as you can see, I also tend to have all of my loops armed, so record enabled at the same time, and that just means that I literally just have to press the clip slot where I want to record a loop, and it will automatically start looping there, rather than having to first arm the track and then press record. And especially if you have loads of things going on like I have in this performance, you don't really have time for that. So that's the way I tend to do it. And I also always tend to line up my instruments in the order I will loop them, because that just makes it easier to remember what's happening next, and it creates an easy flow when you're mid performance. And that comes in especially handy if you can't really see the LEDs on the push if you're outside in broad daylight, which was totally the case when we were recording this performance. As we got out there, I realized that I could not see any of these buttons at all. So I just literally had to memorize what was going where, and I couldn't rely on any of this grid that I'm used to seeing. So it's actually good practice to practice turning the LEDs off on your push and see if you can do the performance that way too, because you might end up in a scenario where that's going to be needed. So what about my drums for this performance then? For about half of the song, you hear my acoustic drums, and I have closed mics on my kick, on my snare, on my toms, and then a couple of overheads. And then just after the drum solo, you quickly hear me triggering my drum rack with a 909 kit, and then actually the 909 kit takes over. And this is all possible thanks to a really cool Max 4 Live device that's called SPD-SX Buttons to Chain Selector. And this is made by Tobias Hunk, and he's made so many, I don't even know how many Max 4 Live devices specifically aimed for drummers. And he runs Ableton Drummer, and he's made courses about how to incorporate your SPD-SX into your live performances. And he also runs a Facebook group called Ableton Drummer and a Patreon, and it's a really, really cool community to be a part of. And literally every time that I ask him, oh, I would like to do this, he's already built a bloody device for it. Anyways, I'm just going to show you how this cool little device is working. So essentially what you can do with this is that if you have all of your sounds coming from Ableton rather than your built-in sounds from your SPD-SX, you can with this little device easily change between kits using the chain selector. This is what the chain selector looks like. You find it here. So basically what you first have to do is to create an instrument rack. Then you have to build all of your different drum kits. Now I've built a few extra here just for the purpose of demonstrating this to you. And then you have to basically give all of them its individual note value here on the chain selector. So we start with 1. This is 1 here. Then we have 2 here, and you can basically drag these back and forth. So make sure that they're all stacked after one another nicely like this. And then you drag in Tobias Max for Live device, the SPD-SX button to change selector, before the instrument rack. And now when I press the plus and the minus buttons on my SPD-SX, they are corresponding to my drum kits here. And this was like literally a lifesaver for me a few months ago when I did a gig live on television at Wembley Arena, and all of my sounds were coming from Ableton, and it was so crucial for me to know exactly what song we were on without having to look at my computer, and this device was that perfect bridge that I needed. So thank you so much, Tobias. So I wanted to show you a really cool effect in Ableton. It's the drum bus. It's a super simple but very, very powerful tool. So for this purpose, I've just bounced all of my drums into a stereo file. And I'm just going to show you, play around with some of the knobs so you can see what you can do with just this one feature, depending on where you want to go with the sound of your drums. Okay, so here are the drums without any effects. I'll put the drum bus on, give them more drive, give them more crunch. And dampen them. And remove transients. Makes it really tight. Or add transients. You can add boom, and then you can work out what key your song is in, and you can actually tune that boom to the key of your song. Yeah, so the drum bus is definitely a super fun tool that I would urge all of you to go and check out and just play around with and have fun with to come up with some really cool drum sounds. One of the features that came with Ableton 11 that I'm probably the most excited about is the multi-track editing feature, the comping feature. So first of all, what I would do is that I would link all of my drum tracks. So you just right click and you do link tracks, and you can see this little symbol come up here. And what that means is that all of your tracks that are linked will now be treated as one track. So any edit you do in one of them will be applied to all of them, which for comping drums is actually really, really handy. Okay, and then I would go and I would say show take lanes. So here I can see all the different takes. I did 4 different takes, and I can see all the different takes pop up here. If I just press the B, my little biro, my little pen comes up, and then I can literally just go in and I can preview, have a listen to the different takes, and then I can just select which part of which take I want to use. Da, 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 da. And you can now see that this has now been applied to all of the tracks that we have linked together. So comping couldn't be easier than it is today. Look at this. Beautiful. So for my drum triggers, I'm using a combination of Roland's RT triggers, which are wicked. On the snare, I have their dual trigger, which means that I can get a different sound in the middle of the snare and from the rim. And then on the hi-hat, I also have a Magnatrack drum trigger. Now, these are super cool. They're basically really strong magnets that you can attach to almost anything. And they actually respond great to the way you play. I've had them attached to my body, to all sorts of different objects, and triggers are just so much fun to use. And obviously for this performance, it meant that I could bring in that really cool 909 groove and just take the whole song really to a different place. Because drum sounds is such an integral part of a whole production, isn't it? So with drum triggers, you always need a brain, you need a module that converts the signal. So in this instance, I used my Elysis Trigger IO, and it's great because you can actually have up to 10 different triggers running simultaneously. And for this performance, I used 6. So how did I then change these sounds super quickly in mid-performance? I basically just hit this pad, and you can see that the kit changed here, and you can also see that it changed here. MIDI assigned this button here to this pad. So when I hit this pad, it's basically like I'm hitting this pad and it moves to the next kit. And at the same time, when I was doing that, I also had to hit this pad, which basically enabled this clip slot here to start recording a loop, because I had to lay down a 2-bar sort of like house beat, which you can hear in the performance. And then I had to quickly press it again to stop the loop, so I then could get up and start another loop where I was recording the conga part on my Handsonic 10. So there's like a lot to think about in a few seconds. And because I have the follow actions going inside of Ableton, I can just really focus on my performance and really enjoy that, and know that Ableton will automatically move to the next section when the time is right. Then when we come to the end of that section, I do hit, boom, this pad here, which basically just triggers rhythm. The very last scene here, which is just that very last note that rings out, and that's, boom, the end of the song. And something I want to show you before we finish is this super cool instrument that I have in my lap called the Aframe, which I used in the beginning of my live looping performance. Now, this is one of the coolest instruments that I've seen, and it's the perfect bridge between acoustic and electric percussion. And depending on how you touch it, it will react to you in different ways. And rather than being sample based, it's based on synthesis. And I think it's a really, really great songwriting tool. I'm just going to show you a few of the different sounds so you get an idea. What I like about it is that a lot of these sounds are already pitched, and that actually helps me. It massively helped me in this performance, because this was the first instrument that I laid down, and that instrument happened to be in A. And then when I was pitch bending it, it sort of created like a minor pentatonic scale. So already I have a box, I have a framework to create inside, which then helped me with the creative process of the whole rest of that performance. And that's pretty much it. The more I use Ableton, the more I just fall in love with the endless of possibilities that there are. And I just feel like a kid inside of a candy shop, just exploring this beautiful program and really expanding my creativity. So I hope that you're going to go and explore the same way that I have. And I hope that this video was useful and that you learned some tools and tricks that you can bring into your own live looping performances, or that I have inspired you to start to create your own live looping performances. I would love to hear what you thought about this video in the comments below, and also if you have any questions or any insights, definitely share them in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And for daily updates, you can follow me on Vicky on Drums on Instagram. And I hope to see you very, very soon again. Lots of love to all of you. Take care. Bye bye.